My name's Caroline, and I've been married to Mike for 5 years now. I work as a chef at a local restaurant, and I absolutely love it. Cooking's been my passion since I was a kid, and I've always dreamed of becoming a famous chef someday. Mike works as a sales manager for a small company. Our life together was pretty good, for the most part. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we managed to make it work. The only real thorn in my side was Mike's mother, Linda. She's a social worker, specializing in child safety assessments for the local administration. And let me tell you, she's a piece of work. From day one, Linda made it clear she didn't like me. Nothing I did was ever good enough for her. She'd always find something to criticize, whether it was my cooking, my appearance, or just the way I breathed. It was exhausting. The worst part was that Mike never stood up for me. He'd just sit there, silent, while his mother tore me apart. One day, I decided to confront Mike about his relationship with his mother. We were sitting in our living room after dinner, the TV droning on in the background. "Mike," I started, trying to keep my voice calm, "don't you think your mom's a bit harsh sometimes?" Mike's face hardened. "Look, Caroline, you don't understand. Mom's always been like this. She raised me and my brother on her own after Dad left. She had to be tough. But..." He cut me off. "She used to tell us that if we misbehaved, she'd give us away to other parents. It scared the hell out of us, but it worked. We learned to behave." I stared at him, shocked. That's terrible, Mike. You know that's not normal, right?" He shrugged. "It's just how things were. Mom did her best." I realized then that this was a battle I couldn't win. Mike was too deeply under his mother's influence. Years of manipulation and fear had left their mark. As if dealing with Linda wasn't bad enough, there was also the constant comparison to Sarah, my sister-in-law. Sarah was married to Mike's older brother, Tom. In Linda's eyes, Sarah could do no wrong. She was the perfect daughter-in-law, smart, talented, beautiful, and well-mannered. Everything I apparently wasn't. "Oh, Caroline," Linda would say during our family dinners, "did you hear about Sarah's latest achievement at work? She got another promotion. Isn't that wonderful?" I'd nod and smile, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. "That's great, Sarah. Congratulations." Sarah would beam, basking in the praise. "Thank you, Caroline. It's not much, really." But the worst part of these dinners wasn't the comparisons. It was the constant badgering about children. Linda was obsessed with the idea of grandchildren, and she made it her mission to remind me of my duty at every opportunity. "So, Caroline," she'd start, her eyes narrowing, "when are you and Mike planning on starting a family? You're not getting any younger, you know." I'd take a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "We're focusing on our careers right now, Linda. Children will come when we're ready." Linda would scoff. "Career? Cooking isn't a career, dear. It's a hobby. A real woman knows her place is in the home, raising children." I'd feel my blood boil, but I'd bite my tongue. Getting into an argument wouldn't change anything. Mike, as usual, would stay silent, pushing food around his plate. Interestingly, Linda never bothered Sarah about having children. I found out why one day when Mike let it slip that Tom was infertile. It was a family secret, one that Linda guarded fiercely. She'd rather have no grandchildren than admit her precious firstborn had any flaws. Over time, Linda tightened her grip on her sons, insisting they help her with everything. And of course, that expectation extended to the daughters-in-law as well. Tom and Sarah lived nearby, so it was easier for them to cater to Linda's whims. But Mike and I lived further away and both worked late hours. We couldn't visit as often as Linda wanted, and boy, did she let us know how unhappy she was about it. "I might as well be dead for all you two care," she'd say dramatically over the phone. My own son and his wife, too busy to visit their poor, widowed mother. I'd roll my eyes, mouthing the words along with her. I'd heard this speech so many times I could recite it in my sleep. "We're sorry, Linda," I'd say, not feeling sorry at all. "We'll try to visit more often." But it was never enough. In Linda's world, we should be at her beck and call 24/7. And of course, it was all my fault. I was the one bossing Mike around and keeping him from his familial duties. As the months went by, I threw myself into my work even more. The kitchen became my sanctuary, the only place where I felt truly valued and respected. Chef Paolo continued to mentor me, pushing me to expand my skills and creativity. "You have a gift, Caroline," he'd say, tasting my latest creation. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words were a balm to my battered self-esteem. In the kitchen, I wasn't the disappointing daughter-in-law or the wife who couldn't give her husband children. I was just Caroline, the talented chef with a bright future ahead of her. The day everything started to unravel began like any other. I was at work, up to my elbows in prep for the dinner rush, when my phone buzzed. It was Linda. I groaned internally, but answered anyway. "Hello, Linda. What can I do for you?" Her voice came through, sharp and demanding. "Caroline, I need you to come to the mall and pick me up. Sarah and I have been shopping, and we have too many bags for a taxi." I glanced at the clock. It was peak traffic time, and the mall was on the other side of town. "Linda, I'm at work. I can't just leave." "Oh, so your job is more important than family?" she interrupted. "I see how it is. I suppose I'll just have to struggle with all these bags myself. At my age, I could throw my back out, but don't you worry about that." I closed my eyes, counting to 10 in my head. "Fine, Linda. I'll be there as soon as I can." The traffic was a nightmare. I sat in gridlock for over an hour, my frustration mounting with each passing minute. By the time I finally reached the mall, I was a ball of stress and irritation. I circled the parking lot, looking for Linda and Sarah. They were nowhere to be seen. I called Linda's phone. No answer. I tried Sarah. Nothing. Finally, after my third attempt, Linda picked up. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep the annoyance out of my voice. "Oh, Caroline," Linda said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "We got tired of waiting, so we took a taxi home. I thought Sarah texted you." Before I could protest, she hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone in disbelief. Then I screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw, letting out all the frustration and anger I'd been bottling up for years. When I got home, Mike was already there. I stormed in, still seething from the day's events. "Your mother," I started, but Mike cut me off. I know. Mom told me what happened." "Why didn't you get there faster?" "She had to take a taxi, because of you." I stared at him, mouth agape. "Are you kidding me right now? I left work early, sat in traffic for hours, and it's my fault?" Mike shrugged. "You know how Mom is with waiting. You should have planned better." The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and tense silences at home. Mike and I were barely speaking, the rift between us growing wider with each passing day. Then, one evening as I was closing up the kitchen, my phone rang. It was Linda again. I considered ignoring it, but I knew that would only lead to more drama. With a heavy sigh, I answered. "Hello, Linda." "Caroline, dear," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "I need you to do me a favor. It's Sarah's birthday tomorrow. I'm throwing her a little party at my house. I need you to deliver food from your restaurant. The most expensive dishes, mind you. For 10 people. I felt my blood pressure rising. "Linda, that's going to be extremely expensive. I can't just—" "Oh, don't be so stingy," she interrupted. "It's for family. And of course, you'll be paying for it. Consider it your gift to Sarah." I nearly dropped the phone. "You want me to pay for a gourmet meal for 10 people? Linda, that's insane. I can't afford that." She sked disapprovingly. Well, if you're going to be difficult about it, I suppose you could always cook the meal yourself and bring it over. That's what a real chef would do, isn't it? I closed my eyes, counting to 10 in my head. Linda, I work full-time. I don't have the energy to cook a gourmet meal for 10 people after a full shift. I see, she said, her voice cold. Well, I'll let Mike know how little you care about his family. Goodbye, Caroline. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling a mixture of rage and disbelief. When I got home, Mike was waiting for me, his face like a thundercloud. Mom called, he said without preamble. Why are you being so difficult about Sarah's birthday? Mom's right, you don't care about anyone but yourself. In the end, I caved. I couldn't face another argument, another night of cold silence. The next day, I placed the order at the restaurant, wincing as I handed over my credit card. It was a huge chunk of my savings, but what choice did I have? The following evening, Mike and I arrived at Linda's house for the party. I was exhausted from a long day at work, but I plastered on a smile as we entered. Linda greeted us at the door, all smiles for Mike and barely a glance for me. Oh, you're here. Come in, come in. Everyone's already started eating. We walked into the dining room, and I stopped short. The table was laden with food, but it wasn't the dishes I had ordered from the restaurant. Instead, there was an array of homemade dishes that looked, well, less than appetizing. What's going on? I asked, confused. Where's the food from the restaurant? Sarah looked up from her plate, smirking. Oh, didn't Mom tell you? I decided I wanted to cook for my own birthday. Isn't that right, Mom? Linda nodded, beaming at Sarah. Yes, and everything is just delicious. Sarah's such a talented cook. I stood there, speechless. Mike nudged me. Come on, let's sit down. Don't make a scene. Numbly, I took my seat. Mike chatted and laughed with everyone, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort. I caught Linda watching me several times, a satisfied smirk on her face. By the time we left, I was emotionally drained. In the car on the way home, I turned to Mike. Did you know about this? That Sarah was going to cook? He shrugged. Mom might have mentioned it. What's the big deal? I stared at him in disbelief. The big deal is that I spent a fortune on food that's now going to waste, Mike. And your mother knew that when she asked me to order it. You're overreacting, he said, not taking his eyes off the road. It was just a misunderstanding. But I knew better. This was no misunderstanding. It was a calculated move by Linda, another in her endless series of power plays. And once again, I was the loser. A couple of months passed, and the tension in our household had become almost unbearable. Mike and I were barely speaking, and when we did, it usually ended in an argument. I was spending more and more time at the restaurant, throwing myself into my work with a kind of desperate energy. One evening, as I was cleaning up after a long shift, Mike approached me with an unusually excited expression on his face. Caroline, he said, his eyes bright, I need your help with something important. I raised an eyebrow, curious despite myself. What is it? It's Mom's birthday next month, he explained, and I want to do something really special for her. Something that'll blow Tom's gift out of the water. Got any ideas? I was about to shake my head when suddenly, a thought struck me. I remembered overhearing Chef Paolo talking about an upcoming event at the restaurant. Actually, I said slowly, I might have an idea. On your mom's birthday, there's going to be a special event at the restaurant. They're filming an episode of that cooking show your mom loves. You know, the one with that presenter she's always going on about? Mike's eyes widened. No way. Are you serious? I nodded, feeling a small spark of excitement despite myself. Yeah, we could book a table for that night. If we're lucky, we might even get to be part of the filming. It's happening in the next room over from the main dining area. Mike's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Caroline, that's perfect. Mom would absolutely love that. She's always wanted to meet that presenter. For a moment, I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. It was nice to see Mike so happy, and for once, to be the source of that happiness. We should keep it a surprise, I suggested, getting caught up in the moment. Can you imagine her face when she realizes where she is and what's happening? Mike nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. We'll keep it completely under wraps. She won't suspect a thing. We spent the next hour planning out the details. I would book the table and arrange everything at the restaurant. Mike would handle getting Linda there without spoiling the surprise. The next day, I spoke to Chef Paolo about booking the table and explained the situation. He was more than happy to help, even offering to put us at one of the best tables in the house. The day of Linda's birthday arrived, and I woke up feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. As I was getting ready, Mike approached me with an odd expression on his face. "Hey, I think I'll go pick up Mom myself," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Why don't you head to the restaurant on your own?" "I'll meet you there with Mom." I frowned, a little taken aback. "Oh, okay. What time should I arrive?" "Just stick to the reservation time," Mike said quickly. "I'll handle everything else." I noticed Mike leaving much earlier than necessary, but I brushed it off. Maybe he had some last-minute preparations to take care of. When I arrived at the restaurant at the appointed time, my heart sank. Through the window, I could see that the dining room was already full. Our family and several guests were seated at the largest table, laughing and talking animatedly. They looked like they'd been there for quite some time. I entered, my steps faltering as I approached the table. My usual place next to Mike was occupied by one of Linda's friends. I stood there, feeling like a ghost at my own party. "Hello, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They barely glanced at me, continuing their conversations as if I weren't there. The only one who acknowledged me was Linda, who gave me a smug smile before turning back to her guests. I turned to Mike, confusion and hurt swirling inside me. "What's going on?" "I thought we were surprising your mother together." Mike finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Caroline, we're tired of all the drama. Mom's birthday should be a happy occasion, without any arguments or tension. We thought it would be better this way." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Better? You mean, better without me?" Before Mike could respond, Linda chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, Caroline, dear. Didn't Mike tell you? We decided to have a little family gathering. Just the people who really matter." I felt my face burning with humiliation. That's when I noticed the camera crew in the corner, filming the whole scene. Linda, oblivious to their presence, continued her tirade. "You know, it's probably for the best that you haven't given Mike any children," she said loudly. "A barren, useless woman like you shouldn't be a mother. If you ever do manage to have a child, I'll make sure it's taken away and given to Sarah. She'd be a much better mother." Sarah, Mike's sister-in-law, giggled as Linda patted her head approvingly. Linda was on a roll now, playing to her audience. "You should see some of the cases I deal with at work. Women like Caroline, thinking they can have it all, a career and a family. Huh. I take their children away and give them to real families, families with proper values." The guests nodded and murmured in agreement, shooting me mocking looks. I stood there, frozen, as Linda continued to spew her venom. I felt a deep sense of shame, not for myself, but for this woman who could be so cruel, so callous. "I'm not hungry," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Enjoy your dinner." As I turned to leave, I heard Linda's laughter, followed by the laughter of her guests. The sound followed me out of the restaurant, echoing in my ears like a twisted symphony. I arrived home, my mind still reeling from the events at the restaurant. Without thinking, I started pulling clothes from the closet, stuffing them haphazardly into a suitcase. I couldn't stay here anymore, not after what had just happened. As I was frantically packing, my phone rang. It was James, the restaurant administrator. I almost didn't answer, but something in me made me pick up. "Caroline," James's voice was urgent. You need to check the social media page for that cooking show that was filming at the restaurant today. Now. Curiosity overcame my desire to flee. I opened my laptop and found the page. What I saw made my jaw drop. There, front and center, was a video of Linda. But it wasn't the polished, put-together Linda she usually presented to the world. This was Linda in all her ugly glory, spewing venom about me, about how she abused her position to take children from their mothers. The video had hundreds of thousands of views already, and the comments section was on fire. She should be fired immediately. How can someone so cruel work with children? Poor Caroline, having to deal with such a monster of a mother-in-law. Before I knew what I was doing, I was in my car, driving back to the restaurant. I burst through the doors, my heart pounding. Linda was still there, chatting animatedly with the show's presenter. When she saw me, her face twisted with annoyance. "Why are you back?" she hissed. "Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough for one night?" Without a word, I thrust my phone in front of her face, the damning video playing on the screen. Linda's face drained of color as she watched herself, her own words, condemning her. What is this?" she sputtered. Then, turning to the presenter, she shrieked. "You! Take this down immediately. I'll sue you for everything you've got." The presenter just laughed. "I could take it down, sure. But it's already been shared thousands of times. You're viral, Linda. Congratulations on your newfound fame." Linda's face contorted with rage. She began grabbing plates off the table, hurling them to the floor. "I'll ruin you," she screamed. "I'll ruin all of you." "Oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you," the presenter said calmly. "We're still live, you see. Your little tantrum is being broadcast to the whole country right now." Linda froze, her face a mask of horror. The other guests at the table sat in stunned silence, looking as if they wanted the ground to open up and swallow them. James appeared at my side, his face grim. "I'm going to have to ask you all to leave," he said firmly. "Now. Or I'll be forced to call the police." As Linda and her entourage disappeared into the night, the presenter turned to me, a sympathetic smile on his face. "Caroline, isn't it?" he said. "Would you mind if we had a quick chat on camera? I think our viewers would love to hear your side of the story." I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. As the camera turned to me, I took a deep breath. This was my chance to tell my truth, to reclaim my narrative. The aftermath of Linda's public meltdown was swift and merciless. Within days, she was fired from her job in disgrace, her years of manipulating the system finally catching up with her. The influential position she'd wielded like a weapon was gone, along with the respect she'd commanded in society. As for me, I wasted no time. The very next day, I filed for divorce. Mike came to me, his eyes red and pleading, begging for forgiveness. "Caroline, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I made a terrible mistake. We can work this out, I promise. I'll stand up to Mom, I'll be better." I looked at him, feeling a mixture of pity and resolve. "It's too late, Mike. You had years to stand up for me, to be a real partner. But you chose your mother over me every single time." The divorce was surprisingly quick. We didn't have much to divide, and Mike, perhaps out of guilt, didn't contest anything. Just like that, 5 years of marriage were dissolved, reduced to nothing more than a signature on a piece of paper. But as one chapter of my life closed, another one opened up in ways I never could have imagined. Chef Paolo approached me a week after the incident. "Caroline," he said, a broad smile on his face, "I've got some news for you. The owner was impressed with how you handled everything. We want to make you the head chef of our restaurant in the city center." It wasn't just the promotion. TV shows started calling, wanting me as a guest. At first, they just wanted me to cook, but soon they were asking me to speak about my experiences, about self-respect and the importance of love in family relationships. I started a YouTube channel, sharing recipes and life advice. The comments section was filled with messages from people who had been through similar experiences, thanking me for giving them the courage to stand up for themselves. One day, my agent, yes, I had an agent now, called with exciting news. "Caroline, I've got multiple offers for you to host your own TV show on cable. Are you interested?" I couldn't believe it. Me, with my own TV show? It was beyond anything I'd ever dreamed of. As for my former family, well, I heard things through the grapevine. Linda's influence over her sons was waning. Sarah, my former sister-in-law, who had always been Linda's golden child, now openly despised her mother-in-law. Funny how quickly things change when the true nature of a person is revealed. Some people asked if I felt sorry for them, if I regretted how things had turned out. The truth is, I didn't. They had made their choices, just as I had made mine. The difference was, I could look myself in the mirror each morning and be proud of the person I saw.
Hey, I'm Aria Johnson, your not-so-average 18-year-old senior from the suburbs of Chicago. Sure, I've got the grades 4.0 GPA, but what really sets me apart? My determination to get into Northwestern and study journalism. It's been my dream for as long as I can remember. Aria, have you finished that college essay yet? My mom, Linda, called from the kitchen one night. I glanced up from my laptop, eyes bleary. Almost done, just putting the final touches on it. My dad, George, popped his head in, grinning. That's my girl. Keep up the great work. They were supportive for sure, but sometimes I'd catch them sharing these strange, anxious glances when they thought I wasn't looking, like they knew something I didn't. Balancing school and my part-time job at Cafe Grind wasn't easy, but I powered through. College isn't cheap, and I was determined to make it. My best friend Tyler popped by the cafe one day and asked, "Yo, Aria, how's the college grind?" I rolled my eyes. I'm drowning in applications and essays, but I'm not giving up. That's why you're going to crush it. You've got this, he said with a grin. Later that week, my boyfriend Marcus surprised me at work. You look stressed, he said, leaning over the counter. Everything all right? Just the usual college panic, I sighed. Sometimes I wonder if it's even worth it. Marcus took my hand, his eyes softening. Are you kidding? You're the smartest person I know. Northwestern won't know what hit them. Their support meant everything. I had no idea how much I needed soon. It was a Thursday when everything changed. I came home to flashing lights and police cars parked outside. My heart dropped. Miss Johnson, an officer approached me, his face serious. There's been an accident. Your parents, they didn't make it. The world shattered around me. Just like that, they were gone. A weekend trip that ended in tragedy. The next few days were a blur of funeral arrangements and endless paperwork. I moved in with Aunt Sarah, who tried her best to be strong for both of us. Aria, honey, she said one night, her voice breaking. What about your college plans? I wiped away tears. I don't know, Aunt Sarah. But I can't give up now. Mom and Dad wouldn't want that. So I threw myself into applications, scholarships, and extra shifts at the cafe. Anything to keep my dream alive. You sure you're okay? Tyler asked one day at school. I nodded, unable to speak. Marcus was there too, always with a hug when I needed it. You're the strongest person I know, Aria. You've got this. But something gnawed at me, like there was more to my parents' story. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something, if only I knew how right I was. 2 years into Northwestern, and I was barely hanging on. Between classes, my job at the campus bookstore, and weekend shifts at Joe's Diner, I was running on fumes. Aria, you look like death warmed over, my roommate Zoe said one morning as I chugged my third cup of coffee. Thanks, I muttered. Just what every girl wants to hear. Kevin, my study buddy from journalism ethics, chimed in. You're going to burn out, Aria. Take a break. But I couldn't. Every time I thought about slowing down, I remembered my parents. They'd never see me graduate, and that kept me going, even when I was dead on my feet. Then came that night at Joe's. It was slow, just me and Eddie, the night cook. I was wiping down tables when the bell above the door jingled. Welcome to Joe's, I said automatically, turning around, and froze. Standing there, as if they hadn't been dead for years or my parents. I blinked, sure I was hallucinating. But no, it was them. Older, dressed differently, but unmistakably George and Linda Johnson. They didn't see me at first, too busy arguing in hushed tones as they ordered coffee to go. When they turned to leave, my dad's eyes met mine. He paled, grabbing my mom's arm. "George, what's wrong?" she asked, before following his gaze and spotting me. Oh my God. I finally found my voice. "Mom? Dad? How are you alive?" They bolted. I chased them into the parking lot, my mind reeling. "Wait. Stop. How could you do this?" My dad turned, his face stricken. "Aria, we can explain. Explain faking your deaths, abandoning me." My mom stepped forward, her face filled with regret. "We were in trouble, honey. Financial trouble. We thought this was the only way out. The only way out." I choked, my voice trembling with anger. "Do you have any idea what you put me through?" My dad shook his head, guilt etched across his features. "We never meant for you to find out. We just wanted a fresh start." "A fresh start? Without me?" Tears streamed down my face, the weight of their betrayal sinking in. "I thought you were dead. I mourned you." They stammered out more excuses, but I couldn't hear them anymore. My mind was spinning as they hurried to their car and sped away, leaving me crumpled on the asphalt, my world shattered all over again. I fumbled for my phone and called Aunt Sarah, barely able to get the words out through my sobs. She rushed over and held me tightly as I wept. "I had suspicions," she admitted later, gently stroking my hair. "There were things that didn't add up, but I never had proof." I wiped my eyes. "What do we do now?" Aunt Sarah's gaze hardened. "We find out the truth. All of it." That's how we ended up hiring Jack, a no-nonsense private investigator with a reputation for uncovering even the deepest secrets. "It won't be easy," he warned us, his eyes serious. "People who go to these lengths to disappear cover their tracks well." "I don't care," I said firmly. "I need to know why they did this. Why they left me." Jack set off to dig into my parents' deception, while I tried to focus on school. But it was impossible. My entire life felt like a lie, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Weeks passed, and I barely slept. Then, one evening, Jack called with news. His voice was steady, but the words felt like a punch to the gut. "Your parents used forged death certificates," he explained. "They had help from a lawyer named Maxwell Green, a real shady character." I gripped the phone tighter. "Where are they now?" "They've been living in Evanston under the names Brian and Helen Carter," Jack continued. "Working odd jobs, keeping a low profile. They've been close this whole time." My stomach churned at the revelation. They'd been right under my nose. Aunt Sarah squeezed my hand. "Do you want to confront them?" I nodded, my throat tight. "I need answers." We arranged to meet at a park, neutral ground. When I saw them approach, nervous and older than I remembered, a flood of emotions hit me like a tidal wave. "Aria, sweetheart," my mom began. "Don't," I cut her off, my voice cold. "Just tell me why." My dad let out a heavy sigh. "We were in debt. Bad investments, credit cards. We felt trapped." "So you abandoned your daughter." Aunt Sarah's voice was ice. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "We thought you'd be better off without us dragging you down. We never wanted to hurt you." "Better off?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I was alone. I thought you were dead." "We're so sorry," my dad pleaded. "We know we can never make it right, but please, can you forgive us?" I stared at them, struggling to reconcile the people standing before me with the parents I had loved and lost. But they weren't the same. They were strangers now, wearing my parents' faces. "No," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I can't." As Aunt Sarah and I walked away, leaving them calling after us, I felt hollow. Like the last remnants of my past had crumbled into dust. The next few weeks were a blur. My grades plummeted. I couldn't focus, couldn't sleep. Everything felt meaningless. "Aria, is everything all right?" Dr. Patel, my academic advisor, asked during our meeting. The concern on her face was enough to break me. I broke down, telling her everything. She listened, her eyes filled with compassion. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said gently. "Let's work out a plan to get you back on track, okay?" With her help, I got extensions on my assignments and set up a study schedule. It wasn't easy, but it gave me something to focus on, something to keep me grounded as the rest of my life spiraled. My friends rallied around me too. Zoe and Kevin practically moved into our dorm. Armed with junk food, bad movies, and endless support. They made me laugh, even when I felt like I never would again. I wasn't okay yet, but at least I wasn't alone. And for now, that was enough. "We've got your back, Aria," Zoe said one night as we huddled on my bed, her arm wrapped around my shoulder. "Whatever you need," Kevin added, nodding. "We're not going anywhere." Unlike some people I could mention, I managed a weak laugh. It felt good to know I wasn't alone, despite everything. Then my phone rang. It was Jack. "Aria, I found something else," he said, his voice grim. "Your parents, they've been involved in serious financial crimes. Tax evasion, insurance fraud." My heart sank. How bad are we talking? Bad enough for jail time if the authorities find out. I sat there in stunned silence. The weight of the revelation pressed down on me, the anger, the betrayal. Then a thought surfaced. What if someone tipped off the authorities? Anonymously? Jack paused. That would definitely set things in motion. Are you sure that's what you want? I hesitated, thinking of the sleepless nights, the tears, the lies, the life I had to rebuild on my own. The struggle, the pain, the loneliness. "Yes," I said finally, my voice steady. "It's time they face the consequences." That night, I sent an anonymous email to the authorities detailing everything Jack had uncovered. As I hit send, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for sure. I was done being a victim of my parents' choices. It was time to take control of my own life. As graduation day approached, I poured myself into my work. Between classes and my internship at the Chicago Tribune, I barely had time to breathe, let alone think about my parents. "Aria, these articles are fantastic," my editor Jim said one afternoon. "Have you thought about staying on after graduation?" I blinked in surprise. "Are you offering me a job?" Jim grinned. "Entry level. But yes, you've got real talent, kid." I left the office that day feeling like I was walking on air. Finally, something was going right. Graduation day dawned bright and clear. As I donned my cap and gown, I felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. I'd made it, despite everything. "You ready for this, valedictorian?" Zoe asked, adjusting my tassel with a grin. I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. As I waited to give my speech, I scanned the crowd. Aunt Sarah was there, beaming. So were Kevin and my other friends. But then my heart stopped. In the back row, I saw them, my parents. Before I could process their presence, there was a commotion. Two men in suits approached them, flashing badges. "George and Linda Johnson," one said. "You're under arrest for tax evasion and insurance fraud." I watched, stunned, as my parents were led away in handcuffs, protesting loudly. Aria Johnson, the dean, called. It was time for my speech. I approached the podium, my hands shaking slightly. "Fellow graduates, honored guests," I began, my voice steadying. "Today we celebrate not just our academic achievements, but our perseverance in the face of adversity." As I spoke about integrity and resilience, I felt the weight lifting off my shoulders. I was no longer defined by my parents' actions. I was my own person, forging my own path. After the ceremony, Aunt Sarah hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you, sweetie." In the weeks that followed, the full extent of my parents' crimes came to light. They were facing significant jail time and hefty fines. Maxwell Green, their shady lawyer, was disbarred. The insurance company they had defrauded came after them with a vengeance. Despite the closure, I still felt unsettled. That's why, when the Tribune offered to transfer me to their New York office, I jumped at the chance for a fresh start. "You sure about this?" Kevin asked as he helped me pack. I nodded. "I need a change of scenery. Besides, Aunt Sarah's moving there too for her new job." Zoe handed me a box. "Just promise you'll visit, okay?" New York was a whirlwind, new job, new apartment, new therapist to help me process everything. Slowly but surely, I started to heal. One day, my editor called me into his office. "Aria, that series you wrote on financial fraud? It's gone national. People are calling for reforms." I smiled, thinking of the anonymous sources I cultivated. People like me, affected by financial crimes. That's great news. As I left work that day, my phone buzzed with a news alert. George and Linda Johnson face additional charges for newly uncovered fraudulent schemes. I paused on the busy sidewalk, letting the information sink in. Then I put my phone away and kept walking. Their story wasn't my story anymore. I had my own path now, advocating for students struggling with college expenses, shining a light on financial crimes, building a life I could be proud of. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to face it head on with integrity and strength. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had made me who I am. And you know what? I wouldn't change that for anything. Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Johnson. I used to live in Chicago with my parents and my younger brother, Mark. We've always been a tight-knit family, and one thing we all treasure is an antique diamond necklace that's been passed down from our great-grandmother. It's a piece of our history, and we're all proud of it. But lately things have been off with Mark. Ever since he started dating Vanessa, he's been going overboard trying to impress her. Fancy dinners, designer clothes, you name it. It's like everything else in his life has taken a backseat. One night, I was relaxing in the living room when Mark walked in, dressed to the nines. Heading out again, I asked. Yeah, taking Vanessa to that new sushi place downtown, he replied. I raised an eyebrow. Did he just buy new sneakers yesterday? He shrugged. So what? I work hard. I deserve to treat myself, and Vanessa. I muttered under my breath, but he ignored me and left. Feeling uneasy, I called my best friend, Emily. I'm worried about Mark, I told her. He's spending money like there's no tomorrow. Maybe it's just a phase, Emily suggested, though I wasn't so sure. Something felt off. Later that night, Dad called the family into the living room. His face was pale, and Mom's eyes were red from crying. I got some news, Dad began, his voice shaky. The doctor found something. I need treatment, and it's going to be expensive. The room fell silent. Then Mark broke the tension. What about the necklace? We could sell it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious? That's our family heirloom. Mom shook her head firmly. No, Mark, we're not selling it. It means too much. Trying to ease the tension, I offered, I'll pick up extra work. We'll figure something out. But Mark just shrugged and went back to texting, completely unfazed. In the following weeks, I worked nonstop. But Mark continued living his high life, going out with Vanessa every night. Then one evening, I overheard him on the phone in the hallway. Yeah, I know I need cash fast. Don't worry, I've got something valuable lined up. My stomach dropped. He couldn't be talking about the necklace, could he? Later, I confronted him. Mark, what's going on? You've been acting really strange. Mind your own business, Sarah, he snapped. This family is my business, I shot back. If you're in trouble. I'm fine, he yelled, storming off. I stood there, a knot forming in my stomach. Something was seriously wrong, and I had a feeling our family was about to be thrown into chaos. Little did I know how right I was. After that, I couldn't shake the suspicion that Mark was up to something. His talk of needing money, the vague references to something valuable. It didn't take much to connect the dots. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. I bought a small hidden camera and placed it in the living room, right near where we kept the necklace. Maybe it was overkill, but I was desperate. A few nights later, while I was working late, my phone buzzed with an alert. The camera had caught movement. I opened the app and my heart nearly stopped. There was Mark in the middle of the night, taking pictures of the necklace and measuring it with a ruler. I couldn't sleep after that. The next morning, I rushed to check the necklace, and my worst fear was confirmed. It was gone. I replayed the footage, and there it was. Mark, pocketing the necklace at 2 a.m. I confronted him in the kitchen. Where's the necklace, Mark? He looked at me like I was crazy. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I saw you take it last night. His face flushed with anger. You've been spying on me? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? You stole our family heirloom. I fired back. Mom walked in, looking confused. What's going on? Mark turned to her, playing innocent. Sarah's lost it, Mom. She's accusing me of stealing the necklace. Because you did. I have proof. I shouted. Mom looked between us, bewildered, as Dad entered the room. Soon the whole family was caught in a shouting match. Mark kept denying everything, calling me paranoid. Why would I steal from my own family? He yelled. To impress your girlfriend, maybe? I snapped. But in the end, nothing was resolved. My parents didn't want to believe that Mark could do such a thing, and without showing them the footage, which would open a whole other can of worms, I couldn't prove it. I called Emily, nearly in tears. I need your help. Mark stole the necklace, I'm sure of it. Oh my God, Sarah. What do you want me to do? Can you help me check pawn shops, jewelry stores? He must have sold it somewhere. Over the next few days, Emily and I called every pawn shop in Chicago, searching for the necklace. Finally, we got a hit. A shady place downtown remembered seeing a necklace that matched our description. The owner, Tony, agreed to meet us. When we arrived, his shop was exactly what I expected: small, rundown, and sketchy. Tony eyed us warily. Yeah, I remember that piece. Beautiful antique. The kid who sold it seemed desperate. My heart raced. How much did you give him for it? I asked. Tony named a price that made me wince. It was way below the true value of the necklace. Any chance you still have it? Emily asked hopefully. Tommy shook his head. Sold it to a collector already. Sorry, ladies. As we left, I spotted Mark across the street, standing next to a shiny new car with Vanessa hanging on his arm. My blood boiled as I overheard him bragging. Check out my new ride. Family inheritance. Pretty sweet, huh? Vanessa squealed and hugged him. Oh my God, babe, it's amazing. I clenched my fists, piecing everything together. He'd sold our priceless family heirloom to buy that flashy car, just to impress her. I wanted to march over and expose him right then and there. But without solid proof, it would be my word against his. And right now, Mark had everyone fooled. Emily placed a hand on my shoulder. We'll figure this out, Sarah. He can't get away with this. I nodded, already forming a plan. Mark might think he's won, but he had no idea what was coming. This wasn't over, far from it. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I set up another meeting with Tony, this time alone. I know you already sold the necklace, I said, getting straight to the point. I'm not here to buy it back. I just need to know more about the sale. Tony looked uncomfortable. I don't usually talk about this stuff. I leaned in, lowering my voice. The guy who sold it, he's my brother. He stole it from our family. Tony's eyes widened. I had a feeling something was off with that kid, he muttered. After a long pause, he sighed and gave in. All right, I'll tell you what I know. Turns out, Mark had been practically begging Tony to buy the necklace, desperate for cash. Kept saying he needed the money fast, like his life depended on it, Tony said, shaking his head. Then, to my surprise, he pulled out some paperwork. Here's the sale record. I shouldn't be doing this, but family's important, you know? I thanked him, my mind racing. This was a huge break, but I needed more. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. A week later, the PI called me. Miss Johnson, you might want to sit down for this. What he told me made my blood run cold. Mark hadn't just stolen the necklace. He'd been embezzling from his workplace and opening credit cards in our parents' names, maxing them out. It was a web of lies and theft, and I was reeling. How could my own brother do this? That night, I overheard Mark and Vanessa arguing in the driveway. But babe, I thought we were going to Cancun next month, Vanessa whined. I just need a little more time to get the money together, Mark stammered. You always say that. What about that inheritance? Can't you just sell something else? She snapped. I clenched my fists, listening to Mark struggle to keep up his facade. I'm working on it, okay? Just give me some time, he pleaded. After Vanessa stormed off, I saw Mark pull out his phone and start Googling. How to sell house without owners knowing. My heart sank. He wouldn't, would he? I knew I had to act fast. Using a burner phone, I called his workplace. Hello, I have information about employee theft you might want to look into, I said, keeping my voice steady. Next, I contacted the credit card companies, anonymously reporting the fraudulent accounts. With every call, I felt a mix of relief and dread. The wheels were in motion, and Mark's house of cards was about to collapse. Not long after, my parents found out the truth. They were devastated, angry, heartbroken. We've lost so much, my father said quietly, barely able to look at me. Mark's trial came and went, and he received his punishment. Justice, as they say, took its course. As for Vanessa, she found another man to latch onto, wasting no time moving on. A part of me felt guilty. He was my brother after all. But then I remembered the look on Mom's face when she realized the necklace was gone. Dad's stress over the mounting medical bills. And how Mark had lied to all of us without a second thought. No, he brought this on himself. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. And in this case, the kindness was for the rest of my family. I went to bed that night knowing tomorrow everything would change. Mark's perfect little world was about to come crashing down, and honestly, I couldn't wait to see it happen. But that's the end of my story. Now, I've got a question for all of you. If you were in my shoes, would you have exposed your own brother's crimes? It's not an easy choice, balancing family loyalty with doing what's right. Was I justified in bringing Mark down, or should I have tried to handle it privately within the family? What would you have done differently? Do you think there's ever a point where someone's actions become unforgivable, even if they're family? Does Mark deserve a second chance, or was this level of betrayal too much to overcome? How would you have confronted him if you were me? And what about the law? Was it okay for me to break it by using a hidden camera to uncover a greater wrong? What do you think drove Mark to betray his family like this? Was it just greed, or something deeper? If you were in my parents' shoes, could you ever trust Mark again? Were there warning signs I missed, things that could have prevented this from spiraling out of control? Was selling the family heirloom the ultimate betrayal, or was it the fraud against our parents that crossed the line? How do you think this experience will affect our family in the long run? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. Thanks for following along with my story, and if you enjoyed it, stay tuned for more.
"You listen to me," he growled. "I took care of Charlotte and the kids. I deserve something from her inheritance. You owe me big time." I couldn't believe his audacity. "Are you out of your mind? You caused her death. You made her neglect her own children, and it was you who gave her the poison that killed her. As far as I'm concerned, you should have died in her place." Before I could even react, he swung at me, landing a hard punch. It hurt, but I was too enraged to care. Fueled by adrenaline, I dodged his next punch and lashed out, hitting him over and over again, until people finally pulled us apart. I had a black eye, but I had broken his nose and left a deep scar across his cheek. "Hi, my name is James, and life has been chaotic lately. I really need to get some things off my chest. My family's been through a lot, and it hasn't been easy. Both my parents were alcoholics. While they never hurt my sister, Charlotte, or me, they were constantly violent toward each other. I've done everything I can to avoid going down that same path, but my sister wasn't so lucky. Charlotte's made some questionable choices, especially when it comes to the men in her life. I love my niece and nephew dearly, but their fathers were terrible men. Thankfully, they're not part of the picture anymore, except for the occasional child support payments. I always offered to help Charlotte with the kids. I wanted to be a positive influence in their lives, to give them a chance at something better. And Charlotte was more than happy to take me up on the offer, mostly because it meant free babysitting. I watched the kids while she worked since I'd work from home. Sometimes it was just for a weekend, other times a few days. That was until she started dating Arthur. I never liked Arthur. He was abrasive, constantly bragging about his money and how he lived in luxury. But Charlotte fell for him hard. She thought she had finally found her Prince Charming, a man who could give her the lifestyle she always dreamed of. As soon as they got serious, Charlotte started leaving the kids with me for longer periods. At first, it was just a few extra days, but soon it turned into weeks at a time. Don't get me wrong. I loved spending time with my niece and nephew, but it was getting expensive. So, one day, I brought it up with Charlotte. "Hey, Charlotte, I love spending time with the kids, but I was wondering if you could chip in a little from the child support payments. It would help cover the costs of food and clothes." She didn't take it well. "Are you serious? Don't you love your niece and nephew?" "Of course I do," I said. "But watching them for weeks at a time adds up. A little help would go a long way." She sighed and handed me her debit card. "Fine. Use this, but only for the kids. Arthur covers all my expenses anyway." I thanked her and made sure to only use it for essentials when she was away. But things started to feel off. After one of her trips with Arthur, she came back looking awful. like they hadn't slept the entire time. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked. "You don't look well." "Yeah, we're fine. Just partied a little too hard," she replied, brushing it off. I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. Then, a few nights later, I got a call at 3 a.m. from my niece. She was only 8. "Uncle James." "Hey, sweetie, what's going on? Why aren't you asleep?" "I'm hungry. Mama won't make me anything to eat." Alarmed, I grabbed some leftovers from my fridge and rushed over to their house. The lights were on, despite the late hour, and the kids were wide awake. They looked disheveled, like they hadn't bathed in days. I gave them the pasta I'd brought, and they devoured it like they hadn't eaten in ages. When I asked when they last ate, they said it was the previous day's lunch. The kids told me they hadn't eaten anything since yesterday's lunch. Furious, but trying to stay calm for their sake, I quietly slipped away while they ate, heading down the hall to find Charlotte. When I reached her room, I found both her and Arthur passed out, completely naked. On the nightstand, a pile of drugs confirmed what I already feared. They had been getting high while neglecting the kids. I quickly checked that Charlotte still had a pulse, then went into action. I packed a bag for my niece and nephew, scooped them up, and took them back to my place. After giving them baths, I made sure they had another meal before tucking them into bed. Later that day, my phone rang. It was Charlotte, and the casual tone of her voice made my blood boil. "Hey, James, are my kids with you?" "Yes," I said coldly. "They're asleep in my spare bedroom." "Oh, good. I must have forgotten you were babysitting this week. Phew, that's a load off my mind." "Charlotte, I wasn't supposed to be babysitting," I snapped. "Your daughter called me last night because she was starving. When I got to your place, the kids hadn't eaten in almost 24 hours. And why? Because you and Arthur were too high to notice they were hungry, or that they were even there." She bristled on the other end. "Oh, shut up. You don't know what it's like being a mom. You only have them occasionally, but they're my responsibility all the time. It's stressful. I was just blowing off some steam." "That wasn't blowing off steam, Charlotte," I said, my voice rising. "That was self-destruction. Have you learned nothing from the mistakes our parents made?" "Don't you dare lecture me," she spat. "Now give me back my kids." I knew I didn't have a legal right to keep them, so once they woke up, I fed them again, packed their things, and drove them back. When I dropped them off, the tension in the air was palpable. Arthur and Charlotte barely said a word, but the glares they gave me made it clear they were not happy. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't hear a single thing from them. Then, out of nowhere, Charlotte showed up at my door. "Arthur's taking me on a 10-day cruise," she announced flatly. "I need you to watch the kids." The short notice left me scrambling, but I agreed. Before I could say anything more, she left without a word of thanks, leaving the kids standing in my doorway. They seemed upset, so I decided to take them to the zoo. It cheered them up, and by the time we got back, they were laughing and excitedly telling me all about the animals they'd seen. I used Charlotte's debit card to pay for the zoo tickets and dinner, thinking it was only fair considering the surprise visit. Days passed, and I waited for her to come back. I didn't know the exact date of her return, but after 11 days, I started to wonder. When 2 weeks went by with no sign of Charlotte, I began to worry. I called and messaged her constantly, but never got a response. A month later, fed up and concerned, I finally reported her missing to the police. A few hours later, they informed me that she wasn't missing at all. She was at home, inebriated but alive. Furious, I went straight to her house and banged on the door until she answered. She looked disheveled, bleary-eyed, and completely indifferent. "Oh, it's you. What do you want?" "Where have you been, Charlotte?" I demanded. "Do you even remember that you left your kids with me a month ago?" She blinked, clearly trying to recall. "Oh, right. Where are they again?" "They're at my place." I've been looking after them for 4 weeks while you've been off God knows where. Yeah, okay, cool. Listen, I'm tired. I'm going back to bed, she mumbled, slamming the door in my face. Stunned and angry, I left and returned to my apartment to take care of the kids. I didn't know what else to do. A few days later, I got a call from the police. Arthur had reported that Charlotte had overdosed and passed away. I was stunned, speechless. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and planning. Charlotte had always said she wanted a simple funeral, so we made sure she had a beautiful one. Thankfully, Charlotte had the foresight to make a will. She left everything to me, her house, her belongings, and her finances. Most importantly, she named me the guardian of my niece and nephew, who were understandably devastated by their mother's death. It was heartbreaking to see them go through so much pain, but I was determined to be there for them. Arthur, on the other hand, didn't take the news well. He was furious that he hadn't inherited anything. As it turned out, everything he had claimed about his wealth was a lie. All the trips, the lavish purchases, they had all been on credit. He was drowning in debt and had hoped to use Charlotte's money and property to bail himself out. I didn't care about his problems. In my mind, he was responsible for Charlotte's death, and I wanted him to pay for it. But Arthur had other ideas. "You listen to me," he snarled one day. "I took care of Charlotte and the kids. I deserve something from her inheritance. You owe me." I couldn't believe the nerve of this man. "Are you out of your mind?" I shot back. "You killed her. You made her neglect her kids, and you gave her the drugs that ended her life. As far as I'm concerned, you should have died instead of her." That's when he swung at me, landing a solid punch. It hurt, but I was so furious that I barely felt it. I dodged his second punch and retaliated, unleashing my anger. I hit him over and over until people finally pulled us apart. I ended up with a black eye, but I had broken his nose and shattered his cheekbone, leaving him with a nasty scar. Arthur tried to press charges, but the police ruled it as self-defense, and I wasn't charged with anything. After that, I never saw him again. Honestly, I wish I hadn't been pulled away from him. I might have killed him if they hadn't stopped me. And in my mind, he would have deserved it. A few months later, I saw Arthur's name in the news. He had been arrested for attempting to smuggle drugs into the country. His plan to make quick money and pay off his debts landed him in prison instead. I felt no sympathy for him. And so, that's my story. It's not a happy one, but there is a silver lining. My niece and nephew are doing well now, and I'm committed to ensuring they live happy, healthy lives. Although the money left in Charlotte's finances wasn't much, I sold her house and used the funds to create a solid education fund for both of them. Their schooling will be paid for, giving them a good start in life. As for Arthur, from what I've heard, he's been in and out of jail and is living in poverty. The last time I saw him, he had lost all of his teeth to his addiction and was living on the streets. As for me, I still carry the guilt of not stepping in sooner, of not saving my sister from Arthur's toxic influence. I don't know if I could have made a difference, but the thought that I might have saved her haunts me. Now, I pour all of my energy into making sure my niece and nephew avoid the same traps. So far, so good. Thanks for watching. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below.